All right, folks. Well, welcome to the COVID-19 Zoom interview, whatever you want to call it, with myself, and then with my guest and or my friend, longtime friend, Dr. Buddy Touchinsky. So, welcome to this recorded Zoom session, there, Doc.
This is awesome. I've done many Zoom sessions this week, and it's gotten to be kind of fun.
It's fun, but it's a little overwhelming when it's like 3 or 4 different types of Zooms and why and who and what. But this is probably a little bit of a unique one for you, and for myself, because I really just started doing these almost off the cuff. But that first of all, Buddy and I go way back, literally back to grade school. Our dads shot archery together. We shot archery together.
I'm thinking 5th grade was the earliest I can remember you. 5th grade, I think, because I moved here in 4th grade.
You went to a different school, and then we convened at our middle school.
Yeah.
Shot some, growing up together through our similar family structures, hunting, fishing, all involved in the outdoors. Later to come back together as adults, as basically workout partners, really. But both, we did, multiple, between shooting guns and doing CrossFit together. And then Buddy, actually, our total reacquaintance was I hurt my back in the fire service. And I'm just going to let you take it from here. So you are my go-to chiropractor. But you can go into, so what do you do, all encompassing, and then we'll get into what this interview or this collaboration is about.
Sure. So I'm a chiropractor by training. I graduated in 2004, started my own practice here in Schuylkill County, and we're in a fairly rural area. So quickly I realized that not only did I have to focus on the mechanical stuff, so the back pain, neck pain, joint muscle, stuff like that, but I ran into a lot of people that were having those issues because they had other health issues. They were eating poorly, they weren't exercising enough, they had gut issues, they had hypertension, diabetes, all that sort of stuff. And so to me, just treating their back pain was not treating their whole body, the whole picture, the big picture, and it was a Band-Aid at best. So over the past, I'd say 12 years now, I kind of went on this journey of learning functional medicine. It comes by different names. You can call it integrative medicine, functional medicine, or just medicine, meaning that it's just looking at the function of the body and then trying to improve upon that function with what other tools we have available to us. First, focusing on the foundations of health. So making sure you're well hydrated, make sure you're eating right, make sure you're exercising, sleep, stress management, all that stuff. So fast forward to today, that's what I focus on. That's what I work with all of our patients. And also in our online health group that we have on Facebook called the Uprising. We help just people every day institute or implement healthy habits, and then we support them along with doing that. Perfect.
So for years, mostly from your chiropractic experience, but you worked with quite a few athletes, high-end competition athletes, mostly. I don't know outside of the weightlifting CrossFit world, but you've worked with quite a few athletes and worked on where their impingements and issues, and that includes myself, when they were affecting us in certain aspects of athletic performance, right?
Yeah, I've worked with some pretty high-functioning, high-performance golfers, professional boxers, what else? Professional wrestlers. There's a few different types of athletes in there that I've worked with over the years. That half our CrossFit gym, because of course CrossFit causes injuries and it injures people getting. But it does expose some weaknesses there and some limitations. So we help. That was probably the most fun I had in practice, was working with people that weren't just worried about getting up off the couch, but trying to improve their Helen time by 30 seconds or their grace time by 10 seconds. And when you're looking at that stuff, it's all right. It's not just I'm out of pain, but it's I can get in a better position, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we haven't even talked about archery yet, but essentially the reason that you and I are having this discussion is because, as a coach, I emphasize with any shooters I work with, beginning, intermediate, advanced is the their movement patterns, as well as basically their alignment, their form, where they are at a full draw position, and how that affects what in our world we talk about target panic. I mean, you know, from a compound side what target panic is. I think that's something you had dealt with, you know, early on as an early, probably teenage shooter or young adult.
Yes.
So, you know, the idea is what the body's response is when you're not in a really good position, and what happens to you biomechanically, not, I guess, maybe what's that word?
Physiologically, yeah.
Physiologically, what happens to you when your body is fighting a force, or when you are under stress, or when you are under anxiety, and what can we do as a competitive archer and or bow hunter, but really, you know, most of what we do is competition archery. What can we do, or what are the things that promotes the negative, and what can we do that promotes the positive?
Sure. And the way you introed that was great, because it totally made me do a 180 on the way I was going to introduce this. And by that, I mean, I came into this thinking like, okay, we're going to talk about the stress response and how the stress response can cause problems with the form. But the way you worded that was perfect, because our form can actually trigger that stress response as well. But only take a step back. So stress on the body. So we have physical stress, we have psychological stress, we have all sorts of different stress. I mean, lack of sleep could be a stress. Drinking too much alcohol can be a stress. Sitting in a hot sauna can be a stress. But psychological stress is a stress just like physical stress, and it can induce a physical response. So the saying goes that if you think you are under stress, you are, whether you are or aren't, physically or actually. That's why people with anxiety syndromes and issues like that, their stress response in their body is just like someone that's actually under a lot of stress. So vets that are come back and they're under PTSD, that stress, that response they're having on a daily basis, even though they're out of the battle, is as detrimental, or has the same physiological effect as those that are still in battle, pretty much. So the way that applies to archery is that when you have, let's start with really good form first. So everything's set up just right. The bow's at the right length for you. It's dialed in for you. It's set up correctly. Everything is nice and relaxed, and everything is, your form is perfect. Like let's start with that. So now it's your body is relaxed in response to that. So now you can focus on just purely the mental component of that, setting the sight on the target and then squeezing the trigger slowly, or whatever your shot routine is.
Right. Well, or in Barebow world, you're shooting essentially an Olympic recurve with no sights. You have to aim at the tip of the arrow, you know, and where the struggle is in Barebow, just so that we can kind of preface this a little bit, you know, and this is target panic across either compound, Olympic recurve, or Barebow. The significance in Barebow is that we don't have a draw check. We don't have a valley at the end of a compound draw. We don't have a clicker pulling through on as a draw check on a recurve, because our rules in world archery are that you can't have a draw check. So basically, we are constantly fighting the urge to let go when we get the tip of the arrow to the middle of the target or wherever our aim point is. So we don't have a thing to really say, our body wants to skip steps. We want to skip steps. So the important, you know, and that I want to lay this out there also for those who watch this, for you and others, just to understand, like, this conversation isn't just for Barebow, but Barebow is definitely kind of our hot topic because target panic is such a thing. But it also, it equates to all of the other disciplines, and really any sport in some manner, when we have this response. So, but
Right.
go ahead. My bad.
So the Barebow stuff just magnifies the issues that we would see in compound archery with a release, so to speak. Right. So yeah, so this is even more important then. So with that said, when you're under that much tension, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if your form is better, and if you're in better shape, and if you're more relaxed, you're going to find it easier to kind of settle into that spot where you need to aim and then release properly. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay, so
That's,
let's take
in my opinion, there are some opinions out there where they say, well, mental game has to come first, that form doesn't matter as much. Also say that poor form does not cause target panic. You know,
right.
whereas in my opinion and from my experience, well, if good form helps target panic, is it possible that improper or insufficient or inefficient form can induce it?
Right. So I think that goes back to what I said earlier, is that whether you think you're under stress or not, you are, because it's stress either way. So we have the scenario where everything is proper form. That's like best case scenario, let's call it. And perfect form, you draw on the target, you settle into wherever you need to settle into. I'd never done Barebow, and then you release. So that's going to carry with it a certain amount of stress, and your body will try to cope with that the best it can. And some people can cope with it better than others. So now let's take that and tweak it a little bit. So now let's say the form's horrible. So let's exaggerate it, and it's a bent over posture. Maybe the arm's not out all the way. So now you're increasing the amount of tension. You're increasing the amount of force that those muscles have to bear. And now that's going to feed back into the system and say, well, this is a higher stress position. And if your body's under more stress, again, it's going to be under more stress. So the stress response, we can call it the fight or flight response, because there's a parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is that fight or flight response. So when your body's under more stress for whatever reason, there are certain stress responses, and that's higher heart rates. That's going to be higher breathing rates. It's going to be elevated blood sugar. Not that it affects the bow shooting so much, but it might. And it's going to be that your reflexes, everything's just going to be on edge. It's going to be like the squirrel running across the yard and sees a hawk. It's going to be jumpier. Or the deer that you step on a branch walking through the woods and you're trying to stalk a deer, and now they're on full alert and they're more likely to jump that arrow when you release it versus being at complete rest. So going back to the archer example, you are poor form, that arm's not out all the way, you might be bent over a little bit, you're stressing your low back, you're stressing this whole arm, you're pulling back, and you got the usual stress of barebow shooting anyway. So now you're magnifying that, and now you're more likely to get to that target, that bull, and then just release right away. And then I'm sure that's gonna affect the way the archer releases that arrow. And so yeah, I think the poor form can definitely affect all of that, and then lead to a greater propensity for having target panic. And and then to go back the other way, having more psychological stress can lead to perhaps having poor form, because now your muscles are going to be tighter. You're not going to be as relaxed. It's like the infielder that's stressed out because it's a big game, and then they sail the ball into the bleachers over the first baseman's head. So I think it can really go both ways here.
And you reference that because you played college baseball, so you were always a baseball player, softball a little bit. So you get.
Yeah, I always got upset at my teammates because they always do that, but I was cool, calm, and collected, and never had an error in my life.
That's funny. So, on top of that, so let's say we don't have optimum form, whatever that form may be, and whatever the discipline is, we don't have really good form, and we already. So then you add on, even if we say we're telling ourselves, we're calm, I'm good, things are going well, we're in the competition line, then you get into a shoot off, or you're into elimination rounds, or whatever you're into as far as an archery competition. And your response, are you under tension even if you say you're not? Is it possible to say that in an elevated state of competitive, is it safe to say that we are all going to have some sort of anxiety or some sort of tension or some sort of stressor at that point in time?
Probably, and I think that's what separates the top tier athletes from everyone else. So you get the Tiger Woods, for instance. I mean, he could be putting for $10 million in the championship for the entire year, and you probably take his pulse. I'm sure it's more elevated than if he's just playing on a regular Sunday afternoon at home with a couple of buddies. But I bet that response is way less than maybe some of his competitors that aren't as good as him or aren't as successful as him. So I think to a certain extent, everyone has it. But those that can manage it the best are going to be better off, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems to be in any sport really any endeavor. And that's probably just the same for bow hunters as well. You know, if you are used to being in that situation, and you are maybe just experience alone can help relax you in the moment of truth. But if you compact that with poor form, poor shot process, and we start to add that little bit of stress on the competition side with those other variables, you just increase your chances of error. You know.
Oh, 100%. So if you are barely holding it together to begin with, so you can practice nice and relaxed on the shooting line, just on a Friday night with your buddies, and your form might be off a little bit, but mentally you can hold it together and you can shoot well. But then, yeah, final round shoot off, and now you have that poor form, so it's going to magnify all of your weaknesses during those times. Same thing with the golf swing, and I'm sure pro golfers would say this. And I use golf because it's such a difficult thing to do. And it's I mean, just micro changes in the swing can be magnified greatly on the other end of the shot, just like with archery. So yeah, any yip in the form at all. I mean, Tiger Woods, he changes coaches on a regular basis, swing coaches, because he's finding changes in his swing or problems in his swing. Now, when he's younger, everything, he's in shape, no problems. He can overcome a lot of that and compensate for a lot of it. But as he's aged and as he's dealt with injuries, he's had to change his swing a little bit. And then on top of that, not only does he have a swing coach, he has that mental coach as well. And a lot of the top athletes do. And no matter the sport, they have mental coaches. Even UFC fighters, you would think that's such a little finesse. You go out and you pound the guy in the face. And I mean, what's the what tweak and form or mental game do you really have there? Which it's really big. It's a lot, if anyone, that does that stuff. But yeah, even those guys have mental coaches as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for, you know, either a coach who can sort of combat on both, or a form coach and a mental coach. I think you have to have confidence, and you have to have results, though. Like, you have to have proven results in some manner to say that I am continuing to improve. I am going in the right direction. If you are constantly going on a seesaw battle of I'm doing good, I'm not doing good, I'm doing good, I'm not, there's a hitch somewhere. And it's not necessarily, it could be you, or it could be the methods, or you need a new method. You need a new approach, because while there's critics of CrossFit, the idea of constantly varied does kind of venture into training, and periodization as well, but ventures into training for almost all sports. You have to be, that's where the functional side of what you do comes in, as far as your body, you know. So is it possible to say that if your body movements, if your ability to get into a full depth squat, if your ability to have your mobility issues in your shoulders and your waist and wherever, your neck, is that stuff going to also have an adverse effect, not just on target panic, but also just your shot process in general?
Oh yeah, 100%. Biomechanics, the biomechanics of your body is basically how the body structure and the movement around that structure. So if you can imagine, let's take a really simple, like, non-movement example, but let's see if I can do this here on the camera. But if I take my head and my ears are over my shoulders and my shoulders are back where they should be, everything is lined up perfectly. It's very low stress. I could stand there. It's like balancing a bowling ball in my hand like this, or like a waiter carrying around the tray. The waiter doesn't carry the tray around like this, because obviously, because of that long lever arm, you're going to put a lot of pressure on that shoulder, and tension, fatigue, shaking, and it's going to be a mess. So same thing with our head over our trunk. So now if you take that head and move it forward, now it's a much higher stress position, because the muscles behind the head have to hold up the head from falling forward. So if we apply that to the mechanics of archery, and this is probably a common thing that you see on the archery line, is that a lot of people, because of their jobs, because of their slouch postures, their shoulder rounds forward and their head juts out like this. So I'm almost positive, without looking or without asking you, that if you try to pull back with that forward shoulder and that head forward, they're not going to get in that nice position. So now, because of that, they're going to have a much more difficult time holding holding the bow back correctly in a lower stress states, because they're just going to be under more tension because of just mechanical disadvantage. Their joints aren't in the right position. Their shoulder joints aren't in the right position. Their head's not in the right position. And that can't be as good or as optimal as someone with the proper posture.
Yeah, in all of archery, and we have what's called the National Training System for USA Archery. I wouldn't say, I think the National Training System is great for Olympic recurve. I think it's the compound version of it is great for competitive compound, both of which teach just that, is the idea to be between the shoulder, the head between midline, between the shoulders, perfectly on top, and that's where it stays. Barebow is a little different because we anchor outside of our face instead of underneath. So it affects alignment. In Olympic recurve, they teach about keeping your hips over your heels and turning at your core. But in Barebow, again, it's a little bit more difficult because of where we anchor on the outside. So we have to make up the distance from here to here, which affects our alignment. But I think the difficulty that we deal with in the Barebow side is because of fighting the target panic. When we create tension in any way in our structure, biomechanically, whatever movements we have, when we create tension, it's my theory, and maybe you can back this up, that's going to affect the way target panic presents itself. So the alignment, getting into the alignment and as efficient as possible is super important for that, so that you can relax at full draw. When we turn at our core, like they teach in the Olympic recurve side, it creates like torque that allows you to be stable, which is okay, but you don't deal with target panic the same way in Olympic recurve as you do in Barebow, because you have a clicker that you pull to, and once you expand to that clicker goes, boom, it's a trigger for you to let go. And where in Barebow, we don't have that. We have to hold. Our expansion has to slow down so that we can let the tip of the arrow float where our aim point is, and then we have to mentally switch gears to finish our shot. And I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's just the idea that we have to be in these biomechanically efficient positions to reduce the stress. And then so if physically we're not able to get into those positions, you've already limited your response to target panic. In the trad world, and like I'm talking your wood bow, one-piece wood bow, trad, long bow, it's very often that you see guys that shoot and they lean real far over, and they're in like this type of position trying to shoot. And there's reasons why they do that. Maybe some to be able to aim tip of the arrow, some because the arrow's spine different and will hit a little bit one way. So if they have a little bit of a cant, it makes up the difference to make, because it's a harder version of archery to shoot in. But at the same time, there's going to be a physiological response to you putting yourself in that position. Is that safe to assume?
Probably for most people. So we're using the CrossFit example a lot. So it's the analogy I'll use is this. It's Rich Froning, one of the top CrossFitters in the world for like 8 years. And you would think he would be doing everything perfect. But you look at his diet, it's crap. But not everyone can do that. Not everyone's a Rich Froning. So same thing here. I mean, I'm sure you have your traditional shooters, Barebow shooters, that they look funky, but they are good. And that's just the way they learned. That's just that they have that feel. They have that, I would say they have that talent to be able to do that. And maybe they're compensating for an injury they had, or maybe they learned correctly, but they're so practiced at it that they can do that. But in an ideal world, if you're starting with like a student, for instance, that's shooting for that early on in their career, and they haven't shot a whole lot, I think it'd be super important early on to help make them, to increase the probability that they will be successful. So yeah, you can just let kids do what they want, or let new shooters do what they want, and hope they turn out to be that, whatever that guy is that can look funky and still shoot great. But the chances are, if you allow them to do that and don't pay attention to the form, I think you decrease their odds significantly of being a decent shooter.
Maybe for a long period of time. I think you can do it. There's people out there that do it for sure.
And I would argue that those people that look funky, if they started off and they did it, they had better form, they could possibly be even better than they are right now.
I
never know.
100% agree with you. I can reference, multiple people who maybe they don't have like what we would consider optimum form, whatever that really is. I mean, I think because structurally we're all different, it's going to change per shooter without a doubt. But I do think that there are certain performance points that you have to hit. And that's where I think that kind of everybody can then find their own way within the form. And that's, good posture, good mobility, head between the shoulders, the idea of trying not to move your head or moving your head as minimal as possible to get into your anchor, stuff like that. Barebow's funky because there's a bunch of different methods out there, and because people like they like to get their head behind the arrow, so they'll turn out real far and they'll do those things that it changes Barebow's dynamic a little bit, where you have to adapt in some way. So either you adapt by lining the string up and in your peripheral along the edge of the riser and looking down the arrow, or in my case, I do the opposite. I just rely on my head not moving or moving as little as possible for me to be super as accurate as I can left and right. Because if my head's not moving like this, then I don't have to worry about it. Do you know what I mean? It's effective for some, maybe not for others, but there's no question that when we get outside of those positions, that it increases tension within the body, and then tension within the body can induce stress or anxiety or the start of target panic.
Right. Yeah. It's like handicapping yourself. Essentially, you're just making it that much more difficult to be a good shooter if you are already starting with an increased amount of stress on your system, in addition to the stress that we already have mentally, which is a whole different topic. But that could affect, and it could work both ways. We talked about earlier how that some people can shoot really good in the practice line, but not shoot that well on the competition line, or when it comes down to a shoot off. And reason for that is because it feeds backwards. So the physical can affect the stress response, but then the stress response can also affect the physical. So now they're more tense. They're not getting in good positions or changing their positions based on their mental stress and anxiety during that moment. So for that, I would say that being on the shooting line in competition day is not the time to start practicing breathing exercise. It's something that I think shooters should do all the time. There's different apps out there. There's Headspace, there's Waking Up, there's all sorts of meditation apps that just a simple art of meditation or practice of meditation on a regular basis can get shooters in tune with the ability to kind of calm themselves down. And then also practicing under attention or under some sort of stress. Because if you're used to doing that all the time, then when you get in a shoot off, it's just going to be another day on the shooting line. So I don't know if you guys do any of that, but I'm just going to make things up off the top of my head here. Whether it's blasting music while people are on the shooting line, whether you're behind them talking, just doing different stuff that provide those distractions so that when it comes down to it, they've already heard it all, they've seen it all, they've experienced it all for the most part. I mean, nothing can replicate that competition stress, but practice that as much as you practice your shots.
Sure. We do that. We have in the Barebow Project subscribers group, we do online tournaments where people have to shoot on live feed. And oftentimes you see where shooting on live feed, just having, seeing the comments scroll through the screen and it adds another level of stress. It is not authentic shooting line, shoot off, shooting against the best shooters in the world stress, but it still elevates you. In some ways, it does elevate you. And the more you do it, the more you get used to it. So you definitely develop a positive response to it, but you have to then, it helps you break the shots down arrow per arrow and concentrate on that one arrow at a time. I know oftentimes I tell some of my youth shooters that shoot pretty good scores, they'll shoot. I had a one young lady shot an XX10 at the Lancaster Archery Classic this year. And she came over to me. She was like, so she shot second. So she come running down. She was like, hey, Coach Frank, I shot an XX10. I was like, oh, great. Good job. All right, well, go do it again. And she just looked at me. I was like, you got to forget about that XX10 right now. You need to literally put it behind you. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. But you can't, your excitement from that cannot roll into affecting your concentration on the next one, because you start expecting that to happen again, and you're not prepared to do the work that it takes to shoot that XX10. You're expecting it to happen. If you're anticipating it happening, that's when this goes up here. So, I mean, that's a way to manage your ability to cope with good ends and bad ends. You know, when you throw an end and it's not good and you lose your mind for a second, you need to move on. And because you can't induce stress, you can't induce that anxiety over a bad shot.
And that's where meditation comes into mind. And believe me, I'd said even 2 years ago, you tell me I'd be talking about meditation, I'd probably think you're crazy, because I thought it was a bunch of bunk, to be honest. But the research is there that proves that it's helpful for many situations. But in that situation, and Dr. Peter Attia, he has his own podcast, and he's a cardiologist in New York. He flies back and forth between New York and LA, but he talks about how meditation changed his life, because he was always a pissed off person, in his own words. He just had some things growing up where he just hated the world. But what meditation was able to teach him, and he kind of was the same as I was, he was kind of skeptical of it and thought it was a bunch of woo-woo. But what meditation simply is, it's being able to have something happen. So say it's a miss, say it's an 8 when you needed a 10. It's shooting that 8, and instead of responding right away and then going down that spiral of being pissed off and being upset about it, it's hitting that 8 and then realizing, okay, I'm starting to feel upset by this, but it's recognizing and observing your reaction to that 8, taking that split second, taking a breath and saying, like, all right, it's okay, we're moving on. Because far too often, and we're going to, especially we see this all ages, but I'm sure your youth shooters are like this, where they react quickly. So something happens, regardless of what it is. It could be someone walks behind them and like makes a noise while they're in their shot, and they get pissed off right away, and they go from 0 to 100, and then it's hard for them to calm down. So once you're already at 100, it's hard to get back to 0. The better intervention point is 0 to wait, hold on a second, and then staying at a lower state, and then observing what you're doing, do whatever you need to do, take a walk off the line, take a deep breath, go back to it, and then carry on from there. So that's kind of what meditation teaches you. And if you do that throughout the day and do it on a regular basis when things aren't crazy, then you can go through different guided meditations, and they'll talk about some of this stuff, or talk about different techniques of managing yourself. So if you're breathing heavy, your heart rate's up, and you get one of these apps, and they teach you, like, one technique is to count your breaths and count down from 30. So 30, breathe out, breathe in, 29, breathe out, 29, breathe in, 29, 28. So it makes you focus on something other than the crap that's happening, going on around you. And then by the time you're done that, you're calm and you move on. And you've moved past that point where a monkey brain wants to start flinging crap against the wall.
That's one way to put it. I never really thought of it that way. Yeah, especially with youth shooters, you see that a lot. You know, they don't have the ability to understand that you can't be affected by things you can no longer control. And that's what happens even in archery in general. I would say in Barebow, the arrow that people most get upset over isn't an 8, because if the vast majority of Barebow shooters could shoot 8 and in, they would be super, super happy. I would say though, like, if you throw, depending on what level, you just throw an arrow that's outside of where your normal group pattern is, and you are upset over that one arrow, or the score that was the value of that arrow, and you no longer can control that. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once it hits the target, it is what it is, it's gone. Then you need to you cannot focus or even remotely think about those arrows. I made a rookie mistake of sorts at the Classic this year. Shot really well in qualifications. I think I qualified somewhere around 10th or something out of all of the shooters. Went into eliminations, and my practice rounds were on the money. Everything was gold. Everything. I think I shot 4 9s in the first 2 practice rounds. And no, not even. I don't even know. Doesn't matter. So first end of scoring came. First end was decent. I shot like a 9.99.27 ballpark. The guy I was shooting next to shot like 10.10.9 or 11.10.9 or something like that. It was, I mean, he just came out of the gates on fire. And Daniel Chen is his name. He's from New York City. Dude can shoot. Hadn't been practicing much, but like he was on his game. First end was good. Second end, he did something similar. I threw like my first 8 or something. And my mental focus immediately switched to, oh my God, I have to catch up. as soon as that happened, there was no catching up to be had. I did not think about my shot process. I did not think about the things that I control. I couldn't control what Daniel was shooting. I could only control what I was shooting. And what I needed to do was think about each arrow as that arrow presented itself moving forward. And I was so caught up in what sneaking a look at his target, where did his arrow go? And it ended up being a mediocre elimination score at best, and losing the round. So it was an early exit from, even though I had a high-ish end qualification score. So, and it's a prime example. My focus went the exact opposite of what I even teach people. But I mean, we're competitors ourselves. We make mistakes. And I think as more opportunities for us to be in those situations occur, it's more opportunity for me to get used to staying relaxed in that situation. So arguably, being me and myself as a barebow shooter, being in that high end situation, definitely a little bit green around the collar for that. But knowing what you have to do and doing it are definitely two different things.
Yeah. But all you can do is practice things. So practice the mental part of it just as much as you practice the physical part of it and shooting. And with practice, you improve. And all we're trying to do really is improve our odds of success. And we can't guarantee anything. We can't guarantee how we're going to respond. But the more we put ourselves in certain situations, the more likely we are to do things the better way and perform well, versus if you just leave it to chance. And again, it goes back to, because we all see a lot of these people that are high profile athletes. I'll go back to the MMA example again. We see someone like John Jones. I mean, by all accounts, he's kind of a screw off. He messes up. He does drugs. He goes out and parties before fights, and he still wins. But that's John Jones. That's one person out of millions that probably want to be in that position. But the rest of the fighters that we hear less about, at least their work ethic, because they're behind the scenes putting in the work and doing the hard work, they're not the aberration. They're far more likely to be successful, or as an individual, you are far more likely to be successful doing things the right way. So whether it's form, whether it's practicing the mental game, whether it's, I'm a health and wellness guy, so it's taking care of your body, it's being well hydrated, it's being physically and just healthy, eating well, all that good stuff, physical fitness. All of that just increases the odds of success in whatever sport you may be involved in.
Outstanding. Anything else that you think is worthwhile to cover or add before because I want people to know where they can find and follow you and understand what you teach yourself, because you're very active online.
Sure. I think we covered it all. We covered the mental game. We covered the physical, the form, and it all goes hand in hand. And I know you said there's kind of a debate between the form guys and the mental guys. What comes first? What comes second? Who cares if it's all there, and it's all part of it. So I would say work on all the above, and only the coach, you and your athletes, your shooters know where they have to spend more time. And again, to go back to MMA, because I'm a fan of that, and it kind of fits to a lot of different situations. It's kind of like the stand-up, the striker that's fighting someone that's a grappler. So Conor McGregor is going to fight Khabib. Do you think Conor McGregor is going to work on his striking during that lead up to that fight when he's already worked on striking his whole life? Or is he going to work on takedown defenses? Of course, it's the latter. It's takedown defense. So same thing here with the shooters. If you're coming up on a big meet and someone has their form down, they look good and they're doing well there, maybe it's you switch gears and you spend more time on the mental component. Maybe if someone that's just in not great physical shape, maybe they have poor posture, maybe they have some shoulder pain or tendonitis that they're dealing with, and that's important to get worked out, because they're going to have to, just like bad form you have to compensate for, or poor mental strength, we'll call it. If you have anything that's in pain, tennis elbow, whatever, and you're trying to shoot through that, that's going to put more stress on the body. So it's just all a matter of you working with your shooters and finding out where your weak spots are, and then improving upon them. And the top shooters, the top athletes, no matter the sport, it's not going from a 90 to 100 that makes the difference between the top 3 and the top 50. It's probably going from that 9.9 to 9.99, and then that's the big difference there. So it's a small tweaks that will pay those big dividends.
Yeah, those who address all of those things the best in the end are typically the ones who will come out on top. Have all when their stars align, good health, good diet. The target panic is managed because, say, either they worked on the mental game, the form is good, worked on the form because chances are they're working on the form for some reason. Something must have happened, and usually that hinges within the mental game anyway. But when all of those stars align, that's when you see the performance of any sport. It doesn't have to be archery. It can be any sport for sure. So Dr. Touchinsky, where can the followers of the Barebow Project and those who see this video follow you?
So our big project right now is, we call it the Uprising. And we call it the Uprising, and it's funny because we were already working on this 6 months ahead of when this whole COVID thing went down. But now it's more important now more than ever. So basically our group is just taking that information that's out there, because we have so much information that's all over the internet. It's almost like information overload to the point where it's meaningless because people don't know where to start with stuff. So the goal of our group is to kind of distill that information down, put it into manageable chunks, and just start to roll out healthy habits on a regular basis. So like this week, we're talking about hydration. And then next week on Monday, we're going to start the hydration challenge where people are going to use a tracker. We give them a form, and we're going to do a challenge where everyone tries to get in their recommended amount of water for just those 5 days, the 5 business days next week, just to see how much better they feel. And then after that, we'll start working on a different habit. And then after that, another habit. So we have about 3 months laid out of all this stuff. And it's just to teach people that some simple things, and they're simple so people overlook them, just like drinking water. Drinking the right amount of water can make such a huge difference. You can lose 5 pounds just by drinking enough water. Your joints can feel better. It just helps your brain work better. You think more clearly, you sleep better. So it's amazing how such simple behaviors can make such a big impact. So we just decided to just try to get this out to as many people as possible. And we were going to charge a membership fee, and we may do something that organize it and do that in the future. But for now, it's completely 100% free to anyone that wants to join. Go to Facebook, search the Uprising, and that group should show up. Our logo is, it's a sun and with a thumbprint in the center of it. It's kind of an orange, greenish, yellowish type of logo. So just join there and then follow along with us. And now more than ever, because we're seeing in a situation where we have a virus that's going around that's it's mainly killing people with other health problems like hypertension and diabetes. And there ain't no cure for it yet. There will be eventually, perhaps, but people are finding themselves below the line, so to speak, and they're finding themselves watching the news, and the doctor on the news is saying, like, if you have these health problems, you're like X more times likely to be affected by this and end up on a ventilator. And it's like, oh crap, that's me. I have hypertension. I have diabetes. So we need to stop being a little bit lackadaisical about our own health and have this kind of personal uprising and say, enough's enough. We need to stop being lazy about what we're doing. We need to make some changes. So we want to be there for anyone that wants that and come along on the journey with us.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for talking and giving your feedback from a medical side and functional medicine side, and it's greatly appreciated. I think it's going to help some people.
Awesome.
All right.
Happy shooting, guys. Take care.